You also worked for a couple of Republican presidents at the White House. What did you learn about the job of president from your vantage point? What did you see?
That you are, in fact, the leader of the free world, that the power of the bully pulpit goes well beyond our own shores, and that this world is better served by a strong America. We are the only country left in the world that can stand up and speak out on democracy and liberty and free markets and human rights. And it all starts with the presidency. There is nothing more powerful than that office, than the bully pulpit. And it's, you know, you hear it, and having lived overseas, I've felt it firsthand. The influence that is felt internationally from this country as we project our goodness and our might, which has always been, I think, an influence for good internationally, is unparalleled. And it's set by the president. And I have seen people like President Reagan, who maximized that bully pulpit, who stood up and spoke out about the goodness of our American traditions. He was optimistic. He was a blue sky optimist. He would always be able to find the good in any situation. He had a very simple view of the world based upon his priorities and what he wanted to get done. He wanted to reinvigorate the economy out of the doldrums of the late 1970s. He wanted to win the Cold War. He knew that he'd have to engage Soviet leadership in order to do it, in pursuing peace through strength. And he wanted to promote freedom and liberty throughout the world. And you always kind of knew where he stood on the issues of the day. He was an effective communicator. He was an effective statesman because he stood his ground.
Are you ready for the job?
Absolutely. Absolutely. As ready as anyone can be. You know, you have to say that you're going to draw from private sector experience, you're going to draw from being governor, you're going to draw from your stints overseas, and you kind of pull a little bit from each one of those experiences. And you take what you've learned and you put that into the job, and you say, do I have as much as any candidate maybe has ever had in terms of running for the presidency? In looking at my background, have I seen the world for what it is? Have I been in an executive position and dealt with a legislature, dealt with difficult and thorny issues? Have I been able to move an agenda along based upon leadership? Absolutely. I think I've got what it takes.
What type of people would you surround yourself with? What type of person would you want as vice president? What type of cabinet secretaries would you look for?
People who believe in service above everything else. People who believe that we are in a difficult and precarious moment in our nation's history. People who otherwise wouldn't think about public service, but today, because of our dire circumstances and the need for good people to step up, would be willing to do just that and take on a set of responsibilities. So I would want to draw from people who in ordinary circumstances would say, I would never want to serve in government. I have too much to lose if I do that. I'd rather stay in private life. I'd rather stay in academic life. I'd rather stay in not-for-profit life. I want to draw on some people who have something to bring to the table, who might not be thinking about serving their country, but are the best at what they do. And based on our time in history and the needs that we have, would be willing to step up and serve given the circumstances.
What do your 7 kids think about this run?
They are terribly supportive. And my daughters talked me into running for governor when I never thought that it was something I would ever do. I'd never contemplated to run for the governorship.
They told you to run?
They sat me down after I had been trade ambassador for 2.5 years and spent a whole lot of time overseas negotiating trade agreements. I covered all of East Asia, all of South Asia, and all of Africa. That was the half of the world that I covered as trade ambassador. And as my daughters grew up, they sat me down at one point. They were in high school, a couple of them were, and said, we'd like our dad back. I said, what would you like your dad to do? I'm doing what I do well. I'm serving my country, and we're making a good contribution. They said, we think you ought to run for governor of our state. And I said, I think you're crazy. I think that's the craziest idea I've ever heard. But I'll give you a weekend to sit down and think about it, and I'll think about it too, and we'll have a discussion. We followed up and we discussed it, and we looked at our state, the state we love, and a state that was in need of what we uniquely could bring, which was expertise in revitalizing an economy and drawing from private sector experience and ensuring that college grads didn't leave for greener pastures and that investment dollars could be attracted and that entrepreneurs would stay. So we mounted a campaign. I told Bob Zoellick, who was the trade ambassador, my boss at the time, I was his deputy. He's now president of the World Bank, that I was going to go out and run for governor. And he said, I've never worked with anyone who's done anything like that. He said, I'm going to live it vicariously through you. Good luck. And so we left as trade ambassador. I hung up my cleats. We went out and immediately started a campaign. Just kind of loaded up our family Suburban, and kids included, and we went town to town, home to home, city park to city park. And after a year of campaigning, which we absolutely loved, we won the election of 2004. So the kids have a pretty good sense for what politics is, the good, the bad, and the ugly. They're all pretty sophisticated kids. They've been around political life. They've been around the world. They're realists, and they're very, very supportive and very excited.
National Journal wrote this about your campaign, that Jon Huntsman could be the right candidate with the right message at the wrong time, based on what's happening within the Republican Party. How do you respond to that?
I give the Republican Party more credit than that. I believe the Republican Party, and indeed people who used to be Republicans, who are now unaffiliated or independent voters, are looking for a good, clear economic message based upon it being delivered by someone who has been there and done that. And I think those three areas that I mentioned earlier are going to be critically important as people consider where we are in our time in history and where we need to go. And that is business experience, governing experience, and international experience. We bring them all together. I think our message is right. People find that we are a conservative problem solver. I'm pro-life, pro-Second Amendment. I'm pro-growth with a track record to show for it. But more importantly, we're going to be honest with the voters. My track record is what it is. My accomplishments are what they are. I'm running on my record. I'm proud of it. And all I ask is for people to look at it. And I think if they do, they'll like what they see. I'm not going to morph myself into something I'm not. I am what I am. The record is what it is, and I think it's absolutely consistent with our time in history. And we're going to take it out to folks aggressively, and we're going to say what I think needs to be said, and hope for the best. But I like our position.
So what is your strategy? It begins in Iowa, moves to New Hampshire, goes to South Carolina, then a series of big states, including Florida, where your campaign headquarters is located.
We're really beginning in New Hampshire. That's where it starts for us. New Hampshire is a critically important state. We've spent a lot of time in New Hampshire, and I think our message is tailored particularly well for the people of New Hampshire. They want their budgets balanced. They want government out of their lives, which is completely consistent with my own view of the world. We're going to do well in New Hampshire. I think we're going to surprise people. This is a state that doesn't like to be told for whom to vote. This is a state that likes a candidate to come in and earn it. They like the old shoe leather approach. They want to know your heart and soul. They want to know what you believe. They want to get to know your family. And I think we're approaching it exactly the right way. And then it goes from there on to South Carolina, where we've got a terrific ground game. We have a great support group in South Carolina. Henry McMaster is one of our leaders in state, former Attorney General, one of the more respected people in politics. Carol Campbell's family, the most beloved political family in the state, came out and endorsed us recently, just to mention a couple examples. But I think the momentum coming out of New Hampshire going into South Carolina is such that we're going to do well. I think that momentum is going to be real. I think the connection with South Carolina on the issues that matter most, things like economic revitalization, things like keeping that Boeing plant that the unions are trying to close down, is going to be critically important to the future of South Carolina. And there are issues that we are all about. And then onward to Florida, which is where I think the Republican nomination is going to be decided. My wife is from Florida. She's an Orlandan. We have our national campaign headquarters in Orlando, the first time in history that a Republican presidential candidate has ever headquartered their campaign in the state of Florida. So I think there's a lot of good buzz as a result of that, and the people of Florida know that we're taking that state very, very seriously. But I do believe that that's where the nomination is going to be wrapped up.
Let me conclude with this point. You've now been on the campaign trail for 3 or 4 months. What have you learned about yourself in this process, running for president?
How important it is to speak from the heart and to be genuine, because you can't have people make you into something you're not. You can have advisors, you can have media folks, you can have strategists, but at the end of the day, you are who you are. And people see you for who you are, and they can cut through the bluster, and they can cut through the artifice with no problem at all. And you're left standing as who you are. Your family is who they are. Your record for what it is. And so I have learned more than anything else at the national level that you're standing on that stage all alone, based upon what you have done, what your record is, and what you have in your heart and what you have in your head. And that is driving us in this race, and I think that's enough to drive us all the way to victory.
Do you have your Republican opponents in mind when you say that?
No, not necessarily. But I do believe that this is a race that is going to be won not at the extremes of the political spectrum. I think that the party, in some cases, has gone too far to the right, and that's not where you win elections. This is a center-right country for the most part, and I believe it's a pragmatic country. I think it's a common-sense, solutions-oriented country. We're a bunch of optimists in this country. You know, we stare down obstacles and challenges, and we always know we can rise to the occasion. And I believe this country is waiting for a candidate who can face the realities head-on, who is a similarly practical, pragmatic, common-sense, results-oriented person. And that's exactly our mode of operation, and that's exactly the tradition we come from. So I think I like exactly where we sit politically. We are who we are. We've got the record that we've got, and I believe it's timed perfectly well with what this nation needs.
Former Governor, former Ambassador Jon Huntsman, thank you very much for being with us.
Pleasure to be with you.